the schedule. So we'll be here for around an hour and a half. We'll start with an intro from my colleague Anna, who's on the call, and then we'll hear from Hiska. She's going to tell us a bit about a case from the organisation she's part of, Fossil Free Netherlands, about against KLM's misleading advertising campaign and what we can take from it. And then we'll hear from Eric, who is from Ad Hunters, and he's going to tell us a bit about what to take care of when filing individual complaints and the specifics of these complaints. And then we'll be presenting the toolkit that we put together. So this will be Anna and Hiska. He'll be taking you through step by step the ways you can submit a complaint and how you can use the toolkit. And then we'll have time for questions. So if you have any questions as the speakers are talking, please just drop them in the chat, and then we'll come to them afterwards. And then we'll go into breakout rooms, and we'll have a chance to talk about any aviation adverts that you've seen, that you've brought with you, any that we've put together for you, and then we'll have time to bring them back to the group and have a bit of a chat about next steps and ways that we might take this forward. So I will pass on to Anna to give you a bit of an introduction.
Thanks so much, Hannah, for introduction, and welcome everyone. Great that you're here. Hannah, if you want, you can turn off the unshare the slides for my input, because I don't have one. And then I see all of you. So yeah, great that you're here. I want to give just a little intro in why we're doing this. So as Hannah said, with our network, we're focusing on the injustice of aviation, but also fighting against greenwashing has been a strong focus of our network and our activities in the past 6 years. And actually, even the network started off with protest against CORSIA, the International Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme, and its ridiculous and harmful offsetting scheme. And now recently we're fighting also very strongly against all different kinds of greenwashing, and against using the hope in techno fixes as an excuse to continue growth, because that's essentially what's happening in the aviation industry, that we see they're using the sustainability claims that are in most cases not reliable or even connected to harmful projects to defend their growth. And currently, as you might know, so-called sustainable aviation fuels are a big topic that the whole industry is jumping on. We will hear later from Hiska how the court actually said that even the term sustainable aviation fuel itself is misleading. But also offsetting is not off the table yet. We have seen quite some research and some groundbreaking stories about the problems of offsetting, but this maybe changed the discourse or maybe changed the perception of people about offsetting. However, we still see that the aviation industry is building on offsetting for all
Good afternoon.
Net zero claims. Now, we think that we need to counter this from various sides, be it on the narrative level, so working towards the term sustainable aviation fuel not being usable anymore, but also making people aware of the problems of so-called technical solutions, be it on the policy level of limiting the space for those ads to be used, being on the policy level, meaning that there will be no substitutes or no easy no support for those technical solutions to be built and to be used as an excuse for growth, or be it through creative actions or on the litigation level. And in the past year, we've seen quite a lot of wins on this litigation or legal level against greenwashing. And we think that this narrows the corridor for airlines to find excuses for their growth. Of course, it's not the only thing to do. I think that's very important to stress that this is one tile in the mosaic of our fight against injustice of aviation, but it's one step and one tile in this mosaic of resistance we're building. And we currently have a window of opportunity here because of all those different little wins that we see, and also because the European Commission is now also inquiring different airlines on whether they're misleading in terms of related to consumer protection laws. And that's where we will get with you also later when we look at the toolkit. So we do have a window of opportunity here. We do have a lot of different groups working on this. And now what we try to do is put together a lot of information and think about how we can get more people active on this. And yeah, before we walk you through the toolkit, I would like to hand on to Hiske for telling us a bit more about the KLM case and why this was so successful and what we can learn from it.
So, welcome everyone. I'm going to tell you a bit about our lawsuit that we did against KLM, which we did together with our local group, Fossil Free Advertising, and I am personally from Fossil Free Netherlands. And we did this in support, with the support of Client Earth. And this was a lawsuit that took a couple of years, but we had a great win in March this year, in which the judge, when the judge said that this campaign of KLM, like the Fly Responsibly campaign, and many of the expressions and the claims that they made were misleading. So you can continue. So why did we feel that it was so important to do this case? For KLM, their marketing is their social license to grow. So if they convince us, all of us, that they are green and that they are sustainable, they will have the room to continue to grow. And we think that because of this growth, their emissions will rise, we will have more environmental consequences and more people who are suffering from the noise. So it's very important that we stop this growth of aviation. And that's why we believe it's so important to fight the greenwashing of KLM. So this is the reason why we went to court. We started the lawsuit already in May 2022 at the AGM of KLM. We went to Paris to the AGM of Air France and KLM. And at that moment, we announced that we would start a lawsuit if they would not stop their green marketing. Which they did not, unfortunately. So we had a conversation with them and they said, but we are not greenwashing and everything we say is true. So then we actually went to court in July 2022. And then like the entire process lasted until April 2023 before we got the final result. And we still went like this year in the summer to the AGM to ask them, are you actually going to stop and living up to the judgment of the court? So it has been something that we have been working on in a very intense way. So what was actually like the court case about? It was about a certain number of things. Like one of the things is that KLM always said that they were committed to Paris. So they had this Fly Responsibly campaign, and they also had a video. And in this video, you saw this girl like looking at the world through a telescope and saying the world is so beautiful and it needs protection. And KLM was portraying itself as being the protector of the world and saying that they were committed to the climate goals of Paris. And the judge said, but you are not allowed to say that you are committed to Paris. Because if you say that you are committed to Paris, people will actually think that you act accordingly, and you are not acting accordingly, because the steps that you're going to take are too small, they are too much in the future, they don't have the impact that you say it will have. Like, for example, you say that you're going to introduce sustainable aviation fuels. I will come back to that term later. But this is not going to be possible to implement this on a short notice. So the plans that you have are not there to have this. So you're not allowed to mislead about Paris. Yes, and the second important thing of the case was about the carbon offsetting. KLM first had like even the term "be a hero, fly CO2 zero," which was already like get off the table by Eric. I think he might say something about it. But KLM was like saying, if you buy carbon offsetting, if you buy for trees, then you don't have any emissions left. And this is like something that is not true, because you can plant, even if you plant a tree, this tree might be cut. It might be gone in 30 years. And it is not permanent. Well, if you have like the emissions from a plane, it will stay in the air, in the atmosphere for like hundreds or thousands of years. So it's simply not comparable. And a judge agreed with that. And a judge said that KLM cannot pretend that the emissions of a flight are going to be neutralized or reduced by carbon offsets. The third thing that we won in the case is about alternative aviation fuels. And I think it's also similar for many airlines, of course. For KLM, they always promoted alternative aviation fuels as sustainable aviation fuels. And they also said this is an important milestone. This is a promising solution. This is going to help us. And the judge said, but you are making it far much bigger than it is. And then the consequence is going to be, so you're not allowed to present this in this way. And the judge said, you cannot call these alternative fuels sustainable. And because they said so, then it also means that the term sustainable aviation fuel should be off the table. And KLM has told us that they are looking for a new term and that they are not planning to use the term sustainable aviation fuel in the future. We still have to see it, though. So we had this court decision, which was in total about like 70 claims that we won. But for us, it's very important that we had like a bigger consequence of the decision. It's not only about KLM, but actually it's about all polluting companies and about all airlines. And we wanted to make sure that the ripple effect is as big as possible. And actually, I think that this meeting and this toolkit is all part of the ripple effect that we would like it to have. So what we did is we sent a letter to KLM and to 75 other airlines saying, hey, this is what a judge said in the Netherlands. And because the judge is basing itself on a European regulation, it is also important that you are adhering to this decision. So stop greenwashing. Then there are like the European regulators. They are taking action against 20 aviation companies. And it's very important that those regulators, they are the ones that can actually like give a fine to an airline. And in our court case, we were not able to ask for a fine because that was just not possible within a legal system, but the regulators can. So it's very important that the regulators are going to take action, look at this greenwashing, and when airlines continue, that they give fines, because we think then it's more likely that they're actually going to listen. The court decision also gave an opening to get the term sustainable aviation fuel off the table. And I think there are far more discussions right now about this term. And this is the moment where we need to be pushing to make sure that we get rid of this term. Because in a Dutch court, they said, like, if you use the term sustainable aviation fuel, this is an absolute term, like sustainable, it's really sustainable. And it's not. Like sustainable aviation fuel, alternative fuels, biofuels, or synthetic fuels, they are not sustainable. You still have like the non-CO2 effects. There might be deforestation as a result of biofuels, or there might be inefficient use of energy. So this cannot be called sustainable. And I think it's very important that we push now to get this term off the table. And the last thing is we need to get rid of the compensation claims. You do see a shift in the landscape. There are like for example, KLM stopped with this compensation in how they offer it and how they talk about it. And they talk now about the contribution claims, but they say it's not like wiping out their emissions. And this is a very important development that we need to push, because also for this is, I mean, like you have a decision, but we are not there yet. More needs to be done. So I think this was like what I wanted to tell, and Erik is going to tell you more about doing cases at the advertising watchdog.
Yes, thank you very much, Hiske. And I hope I can share some light on some cases that I have done in the past. My name is Erik Stam. I'm a teacher. 5 years ago, I was a bit younger and naive, and I started working at an aviation college as a language teacher, nothing special. And because of that, I started to think, more about sustainable aviation, the possibilities and the impossibilities of sustainable aviation fuel. I learned very quickly that sustainable aviation is a contradiction in terms. It doesn't exist. However, I found many instances of greenwashing that I found appalling. It made me angry. It made me very angry. And this is the reason I started, I think, filing a first complaint, I think 4 years ago, something about 4 years ago. It was against KLM. It was about biofuels. And after that, I started to do it more often. That's basically why I became an ad hunter in the Netherlands. Nowadays, it's even an organization. I'm not alone anymore. There are many other people doing the same thing. And the reason that we have this webinar today is, of course, also because we like to promote the idea of hunting on ads more regularly. Do it as a team sport, do it not as a solo activity, but join forces, work together, share basically the things that you have in mind, try to get some cooperation from lawyers, from professionals, from other people that are sharing the same concerns that you have. Now, basically what I'd like to do in my very brief talk is go through a couple of cases that I have done in the past or that I didn't do yet, but I think that might be interesting to explore even at a local advertising watchdog instance. So let's start with the first one, TUI Fair Friday. It's now October 2024, and in 2023 it was also November. There is this Black Friday trend, you know, when big companies try to promote their offers for a very cheap, well, for instance, holiday. Basically, what I found out in this TUI Fair Friday campaign is that TUI, of course, promoted a lot of holidays. They called it more sustainable holidays. That's why they called it Fair Friday. And if you look at their website, many of their more sustainable holidays were more sustainable, although they had an overrepresentation of long-distance holiday flights. So Cape Verde, Aruba, Curacao, Portugal, stuff like that. There was an over-representation of long-distance holiday flights. Well, more sustainable in combination with more long-distance holidays. That seems to be a contradiction in terms. It made me very angry again. So that's basically what the basis of my complaint was. I won it eventually. It took us a couple of months before the Dutch Advertising Code Committee reached the same conclusion. But they basically said that you cannot green a holiday promotion based on the fact that you, for instance, couple the holiday to an eco label of the hotel. So even if you can argue that the hotel itself is a bit more green, somehow, this is, of course, by far not compensated by the fact that you offer more long distances holiday flights. So this is an interesting approach because, I think many people are, vulnerable for the idea that you do a good thing if the hotel is a bit more sustainable, even though people are not aware of the fact that they book a holiday that is very, very far ago. So that's an interesting case, and we won it, which I was very, very happy with. Let me go to the second example. Oh yeah, this is the second example we won. Yeah, Austrian Airlines CO2 neutral. This was another big win. This was my only international win, by the way. I won a lot of cases in the Netherlands, but this was my only win in Austria. This was in my summer holiday, I think 2 years ago. Once again, I saw something on LinkedIn and it made me very, very angry. I have an anger problem, I think. But then again, what did we see here? We see once again a 100% SAF claim. And based on this 100% SAF, Austrian Airlines promoted the idea of that it is possible to go CO2 neutral to Biennale. Well, as we learned from an earlier case, that was the case against KLM and offsetting your flight with planting trees. The term CO2 neutral implied zero emissions. So in other words, no environmental impact of your flight whatsoever. And given the impression that the consumer can have, this can lead to a way too optimistic view on the environmental impact of the flight that you are about to book. So once again, I found a very simple complaint. I think it was no longer than one page in order to explain very, very briefly why there is not such a thing as CO2 neutral aviation fuel, the SAF itself, the biofuel that is used. And therefore that the consumer can be very easily misled by this ad. And I won it. The great thing about this win was that eventually it got attention because of Stay Grounded, but a year afterwards, it was also picked up by another organization in Austria. They brought it to a court, and the same ad had to be rectified after it was also dealt with in court. And the judge agreed once again with the points that it was indeed misleading. So that was a great win once again. Austrian Airlines CO2 neutral flying. This was basically also, you can say, one piece of the puzzle of deconstructing this whole concept of SAF. And I think that's a very important struggle, as Hiska also argued, get it off the table as soon as possible. Let me go to the third one. Oh yeah, this is a new one actually. I didn't try it out yet, but basically what we also now see happening a lot is that an airline company or a tour operator, they try to make very clever partnerships with more sustainable companies. So in this case, you see an ad, Muse against jet lags, and TUI, which is of course a very unsustainable company offering a lot of far away long distance holiday flights. They work together with a company that is called HelloFresh, and HelloFresh itself might be a nice company. HelloFresh is also a company that on its website promotes the idea of we do everything to reduce our carbon footprint and let me help you with that. So it has a good reputation, but then again, they're selling their soul to TUI. And they do it in company with a nutritionist. In this case, you see a woman called Ellie Goldenberg. She's a nutritionist, and basically, this reminds me of doctors in the 50s promoting sustainable cigarettes or healthy cigarettes from Camel. So this might also be a nice way of attacking partnerships like this. I don't know how to do it legally. At least you can shame companies doing this, but perhaps you can also go to an ad regulator and try to argue that the complete impression of this case might be that flying is healthy or something like that. So I'd like to just bring it on the table as a possibility. Maybe this might be a new line of attack in order to attack such partnerships from companies like TUI and other airlines. Next one. Oh yeah, this is very interesting, of course. When we have airlines promoting in the media that they have a very new sustainability goal, we want to fly on 10% biofuel or 10% SAF in 2030 or something like that. Airlines make a lot of claims like this, but sometimes year after such a claim, they also have to step back from this goal. And if journalists do their job, if the media does their job, of course, it can also be picked up by the media itself. You see, for instance, Air New Zealand becomes the first carrier to drop a climate goal. Okay, great to have this media attention, but let's not forget that before they dropped this climate goal, they of course also ran a lot of ads, arguing that they are so sustainable. So it's very important that if a company has to drop a climate goal, that we also make very clear that those goals were never achievable in the first place, so that they basically misled consumers and citizens in doing so. I think that's a very nice way of attacking them. In the Netherlands, you can also argue that, for instance, Shell has paused the building of a new European biofuel facility in the Rotterdam harbor. We knew this was going to happen. It was never realistic that Shell would be able to build such a biofuel facility fast enough in order for KLM and other airlines in the Netherlands to reach their sustainability goals. So be very alert on this. Anytime they make such a commitment to the future, they should be able to deliver on this immediately. That's basically my fourth example. I only have one example to go, and I think that's about the end of my talk. My last example, case 5, that is once again other examples of TUI or KLM making partnerships. We have, for instance, TUI working together with a Dutch organization with a very noble goal, basically promoting reading. Well, nobody is against reading because reading is good for people, it makes them clever. However, TUI knows how to do their trick, and the promotion of reading, which is in itself a good thing, is combined or basically amplified with the promotion of long distance flights. This goes as far, I'm not going to to translate this literally to you in English language, that this organization even gave books away that have been ghost written by TUI. And you also read things written by TUI like, oh, TUI offered us 3 extra tickets in the business class. It was such a lovely holiday. Terrible. Ghostwriting by TUI. Can you also perhaps attack companies like this? Another example, my last example then, is of course KLM and Smile. A more sustainable way without plastic waste of brushing your teeth once again. But then again, a nice company sells their logo to a not so sustainable company like KLM. At least shame companies doing so, but perhaps there's also a legal way of approaching ads like this. That was basically the end of my short presentation. So now it's up to you, I guess. Let's go back to you, Hannah.
Perfect. Thanks very much. I don't know if I'm more shocked by the ghostwriting books or the meals for jet lag.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. Yeah.
Both very ridiculous things. Not sure why I'm surprised, really. But yeah, thanks very much for that. Both really interesting presentations. So now we're going to take you to our toolkit, which is a resource we've been putting together to sort of step by step talk about the different arguments you can use to counter these ridiculous greenwashing flights and also ways to do it. So I will hand over to Anna or Hiska. I'm not sure which of you wants to go first.
Yeah, thanks. I can start. So what we thought we would like to do with this toolkit is providing like very simple guidelines of how to stop greenwashed airline advertising and how to follow the example of Eric, who is filing complaints, or of Fossil Free Netherlands, who is going to court. And of course, there are many different levels how an individual or a group can get active. And we think there are super small steps, and then there are also bigger steps we can take. And I think the first thing each and every one of us can do is watching out for misleading advertisements by the aviation industry, or also, of course, any other fossil industry. So, I mean, this problem is not limited to aviation. And take a picture and and be aware when you're walking through the city of all the terrible advertisements that are telling us to consume fossil products, fossil fuel products. So the first action that everyone could do, is watching out for those and taking a picture. And then what we are doing by our social media channels is trying to spread the awareness of this. So if you see any misleading advertisement, would be great if you can send us your picture of this and what you were going to do with it, whether you filed a complaint or whatever you did, so we can promote it via our public channels and collaborate with other groups, like the groups asking for a ban on fossil ads. So this is the second thing you can always do. Share your stories or the ads you find with us. Then the third action we can take, or you could also take, is writing to your national consumer regulation body. And this is related to what Hiske told us before, that the European Commission is currently investigating 20 different aviation companies, and they told them that they should stop their misleading greenwashing. Now, they had some time to respond to this, but that time is over. So what we can do now is writing to your local, your national consumer regulation body. And we, of course, have a list of all those bodies. We have a link to the list of all those consumer regulation bodies in the toolkit. And you can write them and tell them, hello, I've heard about your investigation. This is great. Please continue with your work here. But I found this and that advertising where I see the airlines are still not stopping their misleading greenwashing. So please investigate that. And we think that makes sense, because then the consumer regulation bodies will be strengthened in their work and might not give in to the lobbying that is probably happening from industry sides. And in our toolkit, we added a template for how an email to those consumer regulation bodies could look like. And then the fourth action, and then after that, I will hand on to Hiske, because she will tell you a bit more about that. If you have a bit more time, you can follow Eric's example and hand in an official complaint to your national advertising watchdog to get a certain advertisement banned, and therefore really limit the industry to do their promotion. And this can be done very simple, but the more arguments you bring, or the more precise you are in your complaint, the more realistic it is that it really gets taken up. However, here I also want to add that, of course, advertising watchdogs are also industry bodies. So we shouldn't put too much hope. I mean, this is not changing the system. It's just a part in all the resistance we're doing. And I think it can play an important part in limiting the industry space for their greenwashing. However, we have witnessed also examples of advertising watchdogs not really taking up the complaints that they got, or kind of being resistant to investigate more, because of course they're also part of the industry to some extent. Yeah, so this may be from my side, and now I pass it on to Hiske to take us a bit deeper into what are the arguments or what are the things you should actually look out for.
Yeah. Thanks. And I think your critical remarks of the advertising watchdogs is really relevant. And of course, we shouldn't put too much, like they are not going to solve the problem. Filing a complaint with the advertising watchdog does help in telling the story and to getting a kind of like counter narrative in the media and to get people to talk about it. So it's not only about winning, but it's also about changing the narrative and getting your arguments in the world. Just a very small example, like Erik and I, we had today a major celebration because we won a case against MSC Cruises. So not aviation, but another very polluting industry. And this is like picked up like all over the media and helps in having the discussion about the impact of how polluting it is. So I think it's always good to have in mind like why you are doing a complaint. But so if you want to do a complaint with an advertising watchdog, it is important to do. You can always do it. You don't need to have background information. You don't need to understand anything of the law or whatever. It's made for people to complain. But that is like one thing. But on the other hand, is like the more information you give and the more arguments you use, and the more you refer to like other decisions, the more chance you have of actually succeeding in a decision. So it does help to do some research into your complaint. And in a toolkit, we've made like 4 categories, which is not like complete at all. I mean, there are many more greenwashing going on, but like 4 like quite essential types of greenwashing where you can complain about. One of them is kind of like it's part of like a promising future. Like many airlines and also airports, they say that they contribute to a sustainable future, that they are Paris aligned, that they will be net zero by 2050, that they care for the future. I think we all recognize these terms. But the plans that they are, of course, like not aligned with it. Because they are still planning to grow, and because of this growth, the absolute emissions will still go up. And now we have like several decisions, like for example from KLM, but also like today what we had from MSC Cruises that say, or Lufthansa, like connecting the world, protecting its future, that all say that these kind of claims are not allowed to be made if a company doesn't have the good plans to substantiate these claims, and they don't have good plans. So I think this is something to look out for. Like every time when they talk about the future or Paris or reaching goals, it's something that we can complain about to an advertising watchdog or like send a mail to a regulator. So you can move on to the next. The second thing is the offsetting, which is still going on. So many airlines say that the emissions from a flight can be reduced, it can be neutralized, it can be compensated, it can, in all kind of way, they say if you plant a tree or if you contribute to this project, the emissions from your flight will be less. And there have been many instances now where judges have said this is not true, because you cannot say like the one thing that you do is being wiped out by the other thing or being erased by the other thing. So look out for all kind of compensation claims. And I think, yeah, this is something that we can and we should win. This is shifting also. I think if we did these cases like 3 years ago or 4 years ago, we would have lost them. But because of like one of them is a very important decision that they made in the Netherlands. Like a couple of 5 students did like half a year of research into the CO2 compensation claims of Shell, and they had these like extensive complaints And then it was accepted by the Dutch advertising watchdog that CO2 neutral was misleading, and later on compensation. And because of like all these decisions, this is something that we can win on. You can move to the third. And that is something that we've talked about before, the term sustainable aviation fuel. The term itself is misleading because if you look at the term sustainable aviation fuel, the term itself is an absolute claim. And if you use an absolute claim, then you need to have like complete proof that this is right. An absolute claim needs more proof than other kind of claims. And this is something that we can like easily attack. It won't perhaps be easy to win because it's like a term that's also like everyone is using it, and even governments are using it, and journalists are using it. So it is a big step for people to make, but I think it's an important one. But I think we shouldn't only focus on the word, because the word is only one thing. But it's also about like how it is presented as a promising solution. So it is presented as like this is going to help aviation to become sustainable. And I think we all know that this is not the case. It's not scalable. It still has other negative consequences. There will still be non-CO2 effects. There are many reasons why this is not going to be the solution of the problem that we have. And in the end, we need like the reducing the number of flights. So I think this is like something that we as a movement should pick up on and can fight together, and you can all look out for it. And then there is like a fourth item, and it is kind of like covered by like the small steps. I think we all know it. I mean, for an airline, like most of the pollution comes from burning kerosene. But still, they present like all the steps that they are taking as a very big thing. Like KLM had this post about like the selling coffee that is like from compost and generating green energy, or we know about like new paint on an airplane. There are examples of like the empty or the lighter chairs in business class. So we all know that the business class, like flying business class, is far more polluting, and it has like a far higher footprint than like the normal flying. But then they would change the chairs of the business class into lighter chairs, and then airlines will present it as sustainable. So there are like all these kind of steps, and I think that you can like come up with like 1,000 examples. And this is something that we can fight. And this is because if an airline makes an environmental claim, then it should have like an actual environmental impact. So you cannot just claim that this is going to make it better. If there is still like a very big remaining impact, then these kind of claims are not allowed. And the European Commission even made a decision on that in a case relating to Zalando. So I think this is like also something that we should look out for. And then of course there are like tons of other things, and I think actually like all kind of complaints are relevant, not only because we might get positive decisions, or we might even lose cases. The first case that I did, I lost, but that in the end it helped me like in sharpening I think this work of like ad hunting. So losing is not that bad, but it does help you all the time to present those stories to the world, to talk about the narrative of the aviation industry. And in the end, I mean, this is like what we need to do. We need to convince people. And this is a tool that we can use. In the toolkit, this is like in its presentation, just a very short snapshot. But in the toolkit, you also find like the decisions of like different kind of courts or advertising watchdogs, on different cases, and you can always refer to them, because in all European countries they use the same kind of like directive, and this directive is like in every country has their own laws, but they're all kind of similar. There's not a big difference in the different countries, so I think we can really like build up on each other's work. So I think this was like what I wanted to say about the toolkit.
Yeah, thanks, Hiske. And maybe on the toolkit, so we will send you afterwards, of course, after the webinar, we will send you a wrap-up email with all the information that we shared and with a link to the toolkit. We will also share it with you now in the chat. Might be still a pre-version that you get now, but so you have all the information there in case you want to do your own complaint. And then I pass it on to Hannah again.
Now we'll have a bit of time for questions. I see we've got one in the chat already, but if anyone else has any questions, if you just put a star in the chat, just a little asterisk, then we can form a bit of a queue. So the first question that I see is, if you make multiple claims / complaints, does this reduce your credibility? Which is a really interesting question.
Shall I say something about it?
You should.
Okay. I've mixed feelings about this question because I think you should be careful. If you file a complaint, your aim should be winning, and I think you should at least try to have a reasonable chance of success. However, I did win cases in the past, and I also did lose some cases in the past. I won most of them, but I did lose some of them. My strategy always has been as follows. I wanted to be able to explain my arguments for a complaint publicly on social media, sometimes even in the media. I needed to be confident enough to have a good story about my complaint, even if there was a reasonable chance of losing. I once tried it at, for instance, a certain form of communication coming from a government body that was basically, coming from the Dutch administration. I did lose it, and it was about the use of the term SEF. And basically what Hiske also said, some cases 3 years ago were not so successful, but 3 years later, people have become more familiar with your way of thinking. And the point, of course, of filing a complaint can also not just winning in the short term, but moving the narrative forward. So yes, you should try to win a case, but it's not a big deal if you lose the case, as long as you can explain on socials, in public talks, why the time is not ready yet. So be careful, but of course, winning helps at least to improve your credibility. Nowadays, I can say that having the reputation of being quite successful in filing complaints, if I now call a journalist or I send an email to a journalist, because of previous successes, of course, they are much more inclined to take my email or my message about a new complaint seriously. So it is something to think about very carefully. Yeah. If you have anything to add, Hiske or other people?
No, I just only would say, like, times are changing very quickly. And I really think that what we lose today, we might win next year. So don't be too demotivated, but sometimes it does help to, if you notice that you lose cases, to try to find ways how to strengthen the case and to find like cooperation with people.
Yeah, join forces basically with other people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question, please? Hannah?
Yeah, go ahead.
So do you think it's better to bring cases as individuals or as organizations? I mean, stay grounded themselves bringing cases. What's the best way to proceed from that point of view?
Hiske, or you?
Yeah,
or
I think it doesn't matter at all. And I like the charm of like an individual doing a complaint, because then it's really like this individual against like this huge multinational and this power balance. I think that is just very strong. So I think that this can be used. But of course, we also have it with our organizations. I think it does help if you do it in an organization that you have more people, might have more people working on the case. and it does help you because you need to convince the committee that it's going to decide. So an organization might have like more like power like to do this research, but I like the individuals doing cases like myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can add that what I would see the best alliance is an individual teaming up with an organization. So that's also why we are asking you, if you're filing complaints, tell us and we can help you make it public. We can help you do press release, give it to our press contacts, and yeah, work around it and use our collective power of all our members also to spread the message. So I agree with Hiske that this individual person filing a complaint against a big airline is a very strong message. But then, yes, let's use our collective power as organizations or as a big network like Stay Grounded to spread the message and bring it into the public discourse.
Yeah, absolutely. One point to add to that. I was a lone wolf the first time I filed a complaint. I was an individual, and I also didn't hardly knew anyone in the environmental movement in the Netherlands. So people like Hiske, I got to know Hiske later, not the first time. I was angry. That was basically my sole motivation of doing so. I was very passionately angry about this kind of greenwashing, and I needed to do something about it. However, for your mental health and also, of course, for your chances of success, I would advise you to join forces with other people, even though you are the person standing in front of the media and saying, "I filed the complaint." Know that there are some people behind your back.
I think they're really good points. And also just to add on that, that we as Stay Grounded did collaborate with advertising and Possible and a few other organisations, as well as local groups in the UK, on an ad that got banned earlier this year. And the UK regulator is very strict in terms of confidentiality and when people can be notified and when the news can go out. So if you are wanting to do press work, which is a kind of next level of action around this, then it can be important to have those who are supporting with press as named people on the complaints as well, because it means that they're party to the information and it's allowed to be shared with them. I'm not sure, maybe Hiske and Eric can say whether it's similar in other parts of Europe, but definitely in the UK, that was our experience.
I completely agree. And basically, I would say that if you file a complaint, given the nature of the work, it's difficult. It's complex. It's technical often to file a complaint. It can be brief. It can be long, but it's somehow technical. You need to have some level of expertise. So it's way harder than writing a post on Facebook, for instance. So therefore, doing the press work combined with filing a complaint is, I think, essential. Basically, what Hiske told today, that we won a big complaint about a cruise company. The press work is essential for the impact that your complaint is going to have. Even winning a complaint without zero fucks in the media basically is nothing, because people will hardly notice a ruling from an advertising watchdog. So the press work is essential, and I think you need to join forces in order to be successful in doing so. Yeah.
So the next question I see in the chat is, are all these actions free of cost? If anyone wants to speak to that.
Yeah, I think most of the times they are. Yeah, many advertising watchdogs have a very low barrier to file a complaint. As a citizen, you don't need to be a professional. You don't have to pay any money in general. The reason that we have this system, I think, across Europe is because this whole system of self-regulatory bodies was, of course, designed for many companies in order to avoid government regulation. And therefore, we can now use this advantage, in order to do this very accessible kind of work.
Thanks. And the next question I see is, how about to claim from insiders in shareholders meetings or in parties to appeals companies? Antonio, maybe you could explain or expand on that a bit, on your question.
Yeah, the question was mine. I'm traveling every year to Mexico because I cannot travel by boat or by other means. And then I sit with other passengers and we get the same information. But at that moment, you see that they are greening everything. Everything is better, the cops, everything. So we can start to talk with passengers if you are there. Of course, I'm trying to travel the less possible, but I just do one holiday a year and I have to travel by plane. This transcontinental is 10,000 kilometers. I cannot go by train, I cannot go by boat. It should be by plane. So I think we have to recognize that we need travel, but we have to do it consciously about what we are doing. Because KLM is even selling you, they say deposit money to compensate your CO2. For example, in that travel that I do from Netherlands to Mexico, Mexico, Netherlands, I produce 32 kilos of CO2. So I have to compensate that with money. But if that money, they use it to do something, I don't know at all. So those kind of things that we can comment with another passengers and to get aware of the problem of the CO2 emissions in a big transatlantic travel.
So your question is about how can we make passengers more aware of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because I see in the Netherlands people is still flying. My girlfriend is going to Greece again because the price is so cheap. There's also something else that we have to stop with those unrealistic prices because they don't cover anything. They are just doing that to compete and to get more passengers, but the emissions stay the same. So I think that is very important to do that, and of course in the airports with actions like the Milieu Defense is doing in Holland, or in Paris,
So I mean, in the Stay Grounded network, that's part of what we're doing, that we're trying to raise general awareness. We also have this information, I posted the link in the chat, like an overview on all the different informations about aviation and emissions, and we're doing trainings to educate people about it and press work and so on. And we hope that this information can also help individuals talking to other individuals, and spreading the message and then getting active. But if you have questions on specific information, you can always write us and ask for it or get in touch. You're very welcome to.
Thank you very much.
Get in touch.
My question is, what do they do with the money? Because once I paid 32 euros extra.
Yeah, that's
and I don't know what they do with the money.
Hannah just posted a fact sheet on offsetting. And there we have, I mean, this doesn't answer the question of your certain project, but it answers the question of why is it generally problematic to have those offsetting projects. And what we have seen in recent years is that there's research proving that actually more than around 90% of those offsetting projects are not actually reducing emissions. And in our network, we also have members in the Global South and that are actually fighting those offsetting projects, because they are taking land from indigenous people to protect in quotation marks forests there. So there's a lot of problems attached to that, and you can find the information on that in our offsetting fact sheet. But if you want to know more, I'm happy to send you more information.
Thank you.
Okay.
So obviously, we've put a lot of links in the chat, and we've talked through a lot of the steps already. So this is kind of looking at what you can do next. Obviously taking a look at the toolkit, reading through it and seeing examples and also the steps you can take. Identifying your ad, as Anna mentioned earlier, keeping an eye out, and if you haven't already seen one, kind of becoming alert to these different narratives that are used, and you probably find you start seeing them out and about increasingly. Then spreading the word, feeling free to email us, either send us it or you can share it on social media yourself and tag us. And I'll, in the follow-up email, send our social media handles so that you have our links. And then the next step of reporting it to your national consumer body, using the toolkit, emailing us if you need any support or want to collaborate. And then if you have more time, handing in an official complaint to your national advertising watchdog, again, emailing us or letting us know if there's any support we can offer. And then broadening this out to talk about kind of fossil advertising more generally and getting active in your local area. There's this great website called World Without Fossil Ads, which both provides a lot of inspirational examples of anti-fossil ad campaigns, and also has a great section with loads of organisations, so you can find your local group. And we'll also share the link to a toolkit that we put together, which is a really extensive list of actions that you can take if you want to get more involved, organising local group meetings or doing other kind of anti-fossil ads actions. And that's my email address there in case you want any further support. I will send all this in a follow-up email so that you have all the links that we've shared and all of our relevant contact details. Are there any final questions or any final comments from any of the speakers?
Thank you for moderating.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here, and spread the word, send it to your organization, to the people you're in touch with, and yeah, let's all take action against misleading greenwashing and advertising of fossil fuel products in general.